Hello everyone, welcome to Sweetcast. This is Clint. So I was thinking about the state of the comics industry. So I'd love to hear what you think about this. It almost seems like the whole push toward politics in comics and all the emphasis on social justice titles and being socially aware, that kind of thing. I'm wondering if a lot of this is just hype. There's like a public relations factor to this. Let me make my case. Let me know what you think. Some of the things I was looking at. Image Comics, this was back in 2016. Eric Stephenson, he was the publisher of Image Comics, and he had a lot of criticisms for the big two publishers. Now, I didn't see any big kind of pushback from those big two publishers against Eric Stephenson. I have no idea what was said, behind closed doors, but he was very critical of the comic industry, and he was worried about the future. He was very vocal about that too. Honestly, I think that was good for Image Comics to be doing that as well. It was, I think, good for their image. Just a quote from the article, he quoted somebody else. A colleague of mine recently said, "I've literally never liked working in comics less." Now, this was in 2016. I think that the comics industry, according to sales numbers, things are much worse now, 2 years later, or I guess almost 3 years later. Much different now than it was in 2016. And so this was from the Image Expo. This was Eric Stephenson talking a little bit about what he, saw as like short-sightedness and looking for short-term gains. And he didn't talk about diversity here, and I'll point that out further. But he's talking about some of the sales gimmicks. Right here at the top, it says, "Those who failed to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We've outlived the comics code. We've outlived the newsstands. We've grown up. But for all those lessons we've learned along the way, we somehow still can't bring ourselves to think responsibly about the future." Okay, in any other context, I would think, yes, this is what I think. This is Comicsgate. A lot of the principles, a lot of the criticisms coming here is, what about the future? Continues, "We worry too much about what we don't have instead of focusing on what we've got. And we keep marketing the fear of missing out as excitement." Okay, so his criticisms are more about relaunches and variant covers and things like that. He continues, "So we've gone back to gimmicks, to variant covers, to relaunches and reboots, and more of the same old stunts disguised as events, when really all our readers want are good stories." Again, this is what today, this is, I guess, 2019, welcome to the new year. These are the same things that readers want. We're giving them great jumping on points over and over again, but it's becoming so commonplace, our audiences instead sees them as opportunities to cut and run. We are misinterpreting sales spikes for long-term success. The worst of all, we are spending so much time looking at how to keep going that we've lost sight of where we were headed in the first place. Okay, and then he blames, when he says we are at fault, he's saying that it is retailers, he's saying it's creators even, and publishers. Those three groups of people. When I read this stuff, I remember reading about this stuff in 2016, and it excited me because I thought, these are definitely problems. These are some things that should be pointed out. He talks about some of the other little insider baseball things where a local comic shop would have to order so many comics in order to qualify to buy certain variant covers of comics. So they were incentivized to buy more than they could sell, which was ultimately not a good business practice. I didn't know that happened at the time, and I agree. That seems like a really sleazy way to sell comics. Where I think Eric Stephenson falls short here is the same principles that he's laid out here that are bad for comics. The same kind of strategy is being used, but in a different way. Now, and it's a political way. I'll also point out that Eric Stephenson said these things very publicly, and there wasn't any kind of public backlash against him or, just dissent from major publishers. It didn't really make sense to me. So this is from that same Image Expo. This is just a quote from his address, and I wanted to play it for you and I guess lay the groundwork for part 2 of this video, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Until very recently, marriage inequality was the law of the land. That's no more. Marijuana used to be illegal all over the country, but not here, not now. or in Oregon or Colorado. Once upon a time, schools were segregated and only white people could vote. I'm sorry, only white men could vote. But those days are long done. I'm sorry to keep coming back to such heavy examples of change, but here's the thing. If we can accomplish the big things, why do we still sweat the small stuff? And comparatively speaking, changing comics is small stuff. But nothing is impossible.
So in context here, I believe, in context, I watched the whole thing actually twice, when Eric Stephenson talks about some of these big social issues that have changed over time and how much progress society has made, and then he talks about changing comics. Now, in context, he wasn't saying that those kinds of things, those like social progress issues, need to be applied to comics. Maybe just a little bit. But what he was talking about in context was changing the comics industry so that it was going to be healthier for the future. Now, this was 2016 in, I think, the spring, right? April. This was before Donald Trump got elected, and things have definitely changed then. The political climate has changed massively. And I'll say it wasn't because of Donald Trump. It was because of the reaction against Donald Trump being elected, and these politics, the progressive view of things in comics that used to be sort of counterculture and hip, I guess. Now it is so ingrained, even more so than it was in 2016, which things were they were bad then, but they've gotten worse. And so the reason I bring these two separate things up is because, to me, I'm actually not seeing them as separate things. Launching new progressive characters or progressive stories, to me, this seems like the new variant cover or the new, it's like the new event or something. It gets a lot of press because of these kinds of things, or they just get enough attention, I guess, that they're really focused on these short-term games to get money. Sort of like a cash grab. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because a lot of these books don't actually sell well, but they do get a lot of attention from the media. So I have to wonder, how else that works about for them, for their numbers, for their exposure, or what it is that they're trying to do. But they're certainly using characters like Miss Marvel, characters like Squirrel Girl, so on and so on. They're using them as a gimmick. And so I start to think about it more, and I wonder, Marvel definitely has a political stance on things, but I also think it's capitalizing on the activism level. Because things have changed so much, it's really hard to be a comics creator that, like, let's say you're pro marijuana legalization. Back 10 years ago, you would have been more progressive and more, dissident counterculture. Today, that's not the case. And so it's almost like you have to move farther to be edgy, I guess. You've got to be more progressive in order to be more edgy. And so, and it's not just happening in comics. This is, like this article says right here, are brands cashing in on social issues with a wave of corporate activism. Now, the kind of gimmicks that Marvel is participating in, they're not necessarily going to help them get money. Obviously, we've looked at the sales. But this is an interesting concept that the brand is cashing in on these social issues. Marvel is a much bigger brand than just Marvel Comics. And so if Marvel Comics are being leveraged to help change their brand and be, I guess, so politically active that they seem edgy, I guess, then, I mean, there's a lot of companies that are participating in it. And I want to say that this kind of thing doesn't work, but we've seen so many major corporations that have been participating in it. Nike's a great example for that. If they're participating in it, they've done a lot of market research. I know that there's nothing you can say for sure if it works or if it doesn't, but the fact that there's so many large companies that have been doing it, my guess is that they know something. They've been looking at the numbers. There's something that's benefiting their brand because of it. Here's a quote from here. A recent article in the Harvard Business Review even offered a CEO activist playbook as a guide for leaders who are deciding whether to speak out and how. A closely allied trend is so-called brand activism, in which businesses launch carefully designed social good campaigns aimed at building awareness about a particular issue while also promoting a positive corporate message. Recent high-profile cases include outdoor clothing from Patagonia's The President Stole Your Land campaign to protect national parks in the U.S., or Nike's adverts featuring Colin Kaepernick, the NFL quarterback who knelt during the national anthem. Okay, so yeah, there's a different. They're cashing in for the brand rather than for immediate sales, or I guess it's immediate brand recognition. They've had a pretty bad run with publicity, especially because of Nike manufacturing shoes in third world countries in sweatshops. And so if you think about it in the big picture, if that is something that is damaging their brand, what they're going to do to fix the brand is something like the kneeling for the national anthem because of police shootings in America. It's kind of funny that the same kinds of people that would care about one, you would generally think would care even more about the other, but it's all marketing. So I'll be honest, at this point, I'm just thinking about this. I want to understand more of it. I want to look into it more, because it's always been really surprising to me if Marvel sales are doing so poorly and those social justice titles aren't selling well. Why do they keep making them? And I think the answer might be it has less to do with sales and more to do with capitalizing on the branding. So they're participating in these gimmicks in order to help their branding. But I have been wrong before, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to hear them. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. It really helps me out. Give me a like, and if you're interested in following me on Twitter, I'm @CastSweet, and I would love to talk to you there. Thank you. Bye.